The topic that I'm presenting is police cooperation in post-conflict environments, and very, very specifically, the case of the JCR in Cyprus. So Cyprus became independent in 1960, with Britain, Greece, and Turkey being its legal guarantors under its constitution. Britain kept its two military bases on the island, while both Greece and Turkey had a military contingent each permanently stationed on the island. Now, following the intercommunal strife between the two communities in Cyprus in 1963 and until 1964, the United Nations force in Cyprus, also known as UNFICYP, arrived on the island in 1964 in order to help keep the peace. Now, UNFICYP has been in Cyprus ever since, and this year, 2024, marks 60 years of UN presence in Cyprus. If you are not aware with the Cyprus issue, it is the longest running diplomatic issue of the West. I come from a policing background. I am now a lecturer at the University of Portsmouth, but I began as a police officer for 2 decades, and then I worked with the UN in Cyprus. So I was very, very keen to research a lot more into post-conflict societies, peace-building agreements, and very, very specifically trust building and confidence building measures between ethnically divided communities. Now, UNFICYP includes a small civilian police force, which I was a part of, also known as UNPOL. The peace talks to find a solution to the Cyprus problem have been going on since 1964 under the auspices of the UN and the UN's good offices. The photos I have included are a couple of very historic photos, including the first Blue Beret edition from 1964, some photos of Canadian peacekeepers who were amongst the first peacekeepers to arrive in Cyprus, photos, much more recent photos, including the use of bicycles that is used a lot in Sector 2 by the UN forces in Cyprus. And the UN forces in Cyprus are it's a large mission with many countries being involved with sending contingents over, as you can get a small idea of the flags that are present in the lower left photo. So in 2008 was about the closest that the island has ever come to really moving towards a solution. The two newly elected community leaders then, Greek Cypriot was Mr. Dimitris Christofias, and the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community was Mr. Mehmet Ali Talat. While they were preparing for a peace settlement, they agreed to establish bi-communal technical committees. Now, these bi-communal technical committees would each deal with a very specific issue and, in their majority, covered quite a range of practical issues. So the technical committees were crime and criminal matters, which is the one that I'm going to focus on today, humanitarian affairs, education, health, telecommunications, crisis management, and preservation of Cyprus's cultural heritage. The main remit of these technical committees, as they were formed with the approval of the two elected community leaders, was to work on confidence building measures and trust building measures between the two communities to bring the two communities closer together. Now, the Bi-Communal Technical Committee on Crime and Criminal Matters, which has the long abbreviation of TCCCM, has as terms of reference to work on the following: cooperation in the prevention of crime and dealing with crime-related matters across the UN buffer zone, also known as the Green Line, money laundering, road safety, illegal immigration, especially across the buffer zone, trafficking in people, drugs, and weapons, and terrorism, including the financing of terrorism. So what you can see here is the technical committee on the left in 2008, which is made up of 7 members from each community, and sitting in the middle as the UN representative is the senior police advisor of UNPOL, of the UN forces in Cyprus. In 2008, the technical committee realized the necessity for important information to be passed from one police agency in one community to the other police agency in the other community. And so the idea of the joint communications room began in 2008. The JCR actually started functioning in 2009, and the photo you see on the right is the technical committee as they were personed in 2018, 10 years after the initial idea for the JCR began. So as I mentioned, there are 7 members from each community on the technical committee. All members have been appointed in a personal capacity, even if they still hold official positions. For example, some are serving law enforcement personnel in both communities. Both leaders of the technical committee are unpaid volunteers, and they have been appointed directly by the elected respective community leaders, just as the rest of the technical committee members. The facilitator of the committee and its convener is the senior police advisor, meaning the civilian police commander within the United Nations mission in Cyprus. It should be noted that the technical committee does not actually have any statutory authority whatsoever anywhere on the island. In 2021, I facilitated a workshop with the Foreign Office and the NCA, the National Crime Association from the UK, to look at this very, very unique mechanism that exists in Cyprus. In fact, it is internationally the only one of its kind. The JCR, the Joint Communications Room, was a development of that 2008 Memorandum of Understanding that created all the bicommunal technical committees. As you saw in the previous slide, that is all it is. It is literally a bunker in the UN buffer zone in the UN headquarters area in Nicosia. It is regularly staffed by bicommunal individuals. There are 2 representatives of the Turkish Cypriot community and 2 representatives of the Greek Cypriot community who man it on the daily. It utilizes the support and mediating role of the UN. It deals, though not exclusively, with crime-related issues that require communication and collaboration between Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities and their respective law enforcement agencies. Referrals are made to the JCR by both law enforcement agencies, requesting assistance from the other community. With assistance, we mean usually information exchange. However, there have also been instances of assistance in terms of swapping, if you will, or moving fugitives across the Green Line. A very, very common example of what goes on, and perhaps not so dramatic, is the issue of stolen property. For example, if a car is stolen outside a victim's home in Nicosia, and then it is driven to Kyrenia and abandoned there, Greek Cypriot police might request the JCR to make contact with Turkish Cypriot law enforcement personnel in order to assist the victim by locating the vehicle and arranging for the owner to then collect the vehicle. Now, what is very important to note before I get into the methodology is that neither the Republic of Cyprus nor the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus officially recognize each other. That means that the police forces will not speak directly to each other. And that's where the Joint Communications Room comes in as a very simple and yet very, very effective mechanism, where basically each side talks to the UN and the UN liaises and the UN transfers the information from one side to the other. So effectively, what has been achieved is cooperation without recognition. And this is very, very important in very thorny landscapes like the one we see in ethnically divided Cyprus. Now, I began my LLM in my master's in international law in 2014 while I was still working with UNFICYP. And in 2017, I began this research with the aim of documenting and analyzing exactly how the JCR works and whether or not it has been effective over the course of its almost 10 years at the time. Special permission was granted for access to previously undisclosed JCR case data. The data was in the form of a computerized incident logbook from June 2009 until the 31st of December 2018. The logbook listed all requests for assistance that were made from both of the law enforcement agencies through the UN to the other agency. And until this research project, this information had remained confidential and had not been the subject of any academic analysis or publication prior to my publication with my LLM supervisor in 2022. The logbook data was codified by myself. I went through the 1,500 cases one by one and coded them in Excel, and then proceeded to analyze that data through SPSS. A very important note is that from 2019 and then following COVID until 2023, first of all, I obviously didn't have any access to any data during the lockdowns. But another issue that arose was that the computerized logbook was abandoned because staff changed within the JCR. And where there was an Excel file, which was relatively straightforward to code, it then became handwritten logbooks with entries scattered across multiple volumes, which unfortunately hindered my ability to continue the specific coding and the specific analysis from 2019 onwards. What I did manage to receive was the total number of requests in the years 2019 and 2020. As you can see, over the course of its function from 2009 until 2020, both sides have continuously increased the numbers of requests that they make. The Greek Cypriot requests are significantly larger over time than the Turkish Cypriot requests for information. You may see a spike in the Greek Cypriot requests that occurred in 2019. That is because at the time, Cyprus experienced its first recorded serial killer, and because it was the serial killer's modus operandum was very focused on missing persons, there was a very, very large subsequent anxiety about third country nationals as missing persons and whether or not they were found in the north of Cyprus. So there was a huge increase in requests for information about potential missing persons in the north of Cyprus. Now, in the analysis that I could do, the detailed analysis from 2009 until 2018, in terms of breaking down the type of request from both sides to each other, the most frequent type of request was a request for information that would assist in police investigations. Information in reference to stolen property came a close second. Requests relating to passing information only for reference is the third highest kind of request. And I highlight this because this was cases of information passed to the other side of their own accord. So the Greek Cypriot police organization would pass on this information to the Turkish Cypriot police organization without first having had a request from them. So it was, in all essence, a gesture of trust and a gesture of cooperation. Requests for whether people had crossed through the checkpoints, requests around missing persons, humanitarian requests were only 3.5% of the total. And in the minority, requests relating to illegal immigration, whether or not someone had been arrested or convicted by each ethnic community, and requests for an arrested suspect to be delivered to the authorities. In the way of analyzing the outcome of these requests, in almost 50% of the cases, the information was passed to the other side and that was it. In the other cases, both of the police complied with the request on both sides. The outcome, unfortunately, was not entered into the database in 5.5% of the cases, so I was unable to see what went on with those cases. In addition, in 4% of the cases, the outcome was just left as pending. From the outcomes where I was able to define a concrete outcome, we have stolen property being returned to the owner, owners of the stolen property being informed, persons actually tried, sentenced, and fined within the TRNC authorities in 2.3% of the cases. The TRNC police and the Republic of Cyprus police refused to comply with particular requests in only 1.7 and 1% of cases. And then the outcomes that occurred less frequently were that the inquiries are ongoing, they continue, the persons were fined and released, the persons were located and returned, or a humanitarian request was carried out. In 2019, on completing this first stage of data analysis, I presented this analysis at the Justice Across Boundaries workshop, which took place in the Lauterpacht Center at the University of Cambridge. It is very important for me as a researcher, beyond the concrete data analysis, to look at why the JCR, as opposed to other ethnically divided frozen conflicts in the world, has managed to be successful since 2009. One main reason is that the technical committee members are very, very dedicated. They are very devoted and they're very, very driven, especially the Greek Cypriot and the Turkish Cypriot leaders of the technical committee. There is a great amount of respect for the sensitivities of the other ethnic community. The work of the technical committee, and especially the two leaders of the technical committee, and then in continuation, the JCR, is built on friendships. It's built on personal social interaction. It's built on frontline officers who want to get on with crime control across the buffer zone, and they're not hindered by the political situation, which has been prevalent since the early 60s. So there is trust. There is trust between the bicommunal members of the community, and there is much, much more that unites the committees, which are focused on the prevention of crime, than separates them. These are the two original leaders of the technical committee that I mentioned before. To the left is Professor Kapardis, who is actually my father. Should the original remit of the JCR be re-examined? I believe it should. Only the two community leaders and representatives on the island can reach a joint decision to expand and formalize the JCR and its functions. I haven't gone into a lot of the limitations because that would have taken too much of presentation time, but I'm very, very happy to supply any information or answer any questions, either now or moving forward by email. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to any questions if you have them.